I liked Rebel Rising a lot more than I thought I would. I thought Rogue One was an awful movie that barely ever made sense, and having read Catalyst, I felt like I'd had enough of Jyn and the Ersos to last a lifetime. So I went into Rebel Rising thinking it's only a young adult novel, so it won't take me long to read it, and I should just get it over and done with. But after reading it, I have to say, it's a pretty enjoyable book. Jyn is the same as she is in Rogue One, in that she doesn't really do anything. Everything else happens around her and she just goes along with it. As Yahtzee said in his Tomb Raider review, you can't kick a concrete block off the back of a truck and call that a character arc. It's the same thing with Jyn. She almost never really takes the reins of her own life and makes a choice, so it's not really a book about her choices, but more about how she feels when these things happen to her. This is where I actually started to like the book. Because it's more about how Jyn feels than action, Beth Revis has managed to show just what a morbid life Jyn has had. I mean really horrible. From the death of her mother and apparent betrayal of her father, to abandonment, hope, love, death, imprisonment and forced labour. It's no wonder Jyn was okay with dying at the end of Rogue One, because apart from the first 8 years of her life, she's known nothing but absolute misery. Rebel Rising also shows just how abusive Saw Gerrera was to Jyn. Instead of taking her in and raising her as a daughter, he raised her to be a soldier. She didn't even get dinners, instead having to rely solely on nutrient milk and food cubes. It felt like abuse through neglection. No child should spend all day training, then eat a food cube. No birthdays were ever celebrated, no proper education was given. Saw didn't even teach her how to be clean, instead one of his partisans had to talk to Jyn about it. It's alluded to that Saw might have asked her to, but it's never made clear. The fact is, there was never a sense of love there, just cold, stark survival, and it plays very well into Jyn's miserable life story. In the same way Catalyst added something to Rogue One by fully explaining the events that led up to the beginning of it, Rebel Rising does the same for Jyn and the characters she already knew. It adds a new depth to the scene when Jyn meets Saw Gerrera in Rogue One, or when she's talking to Mon Mothma and expresses her dislike of the Rebels, because Rebel Rising actually shows what happened between her and Saw Gerrera, and it shows why Jyn dislikes the Rebels. In Rogue One, we just had to accept that she didn't like the Rebels, and it's a much more palatable opinion when there's a reason for it. It was nice to see both Bloodburn and Hedera Serum from Bloodline, and also Dunium and Tabanagas from Thrawn make appearances. Kyber crystals are of course mentioned non-stop, but that's to be expected when an Erso is the main character. Jyn also has a few moments where she remembers events that James Luceno wrote about in Catalyst, so as well as making the book feel like part of a whole story by referencing new things from other books, referencing actual events from Catalyst made it feel like it really is part of a trilogy and part of the larger Star Wars universe. This is how you expand the Star Wars universe, not by stealing from other writers, not by retconning what came before, but by accepting what came before and using it to make the book you're writing feel like it's the same universe as the other books and movies. There's not a single retcon in Rebel Rising, and it acknowledges other books. I can't remember the last time I said that about a Disney Star Wars book, and it's a fucking nice change, and as a fan I really appreciate it. For the most part, I enjoyed Revis's writing, but something that did piss me off was the use of the phrase, "such and such barked a fucking laugh." It's from the first Battlefront book. It was so overused in Twilight Company, and I cannot work out why Revis has used it about 3 times in Rebel Rising. It grated on me in Twilight Company, and it does the same here. The first time I laughed because I thought what a small world it is that someone would use the same phrase. But then Revis used it 2 or 3 more times, and it pissed me off because there are other ways to write that someone laughed. People don't always bark a laugh. Other than that, I enjoyed Revis's writing and pacing. The book slows down a bit in the middle, but rather than feeling like a lull, it felt more like the eye of the storm, so it fitted in nicely in my opinion. I also liked how every now and then there was a chapter that described Jin's present situation, where she's in the prison on Wobani. It gave just enough of a taste of her current predicament, while still letting you wonder what would come next in the book, and exactly how she ended up there. Between Rogue One, Catalyst and Rebel Rising, I feel like there's nothing about Jin I don't know. I've read from her literal birth to the Urso's escape to Lamu in Catalyst. I've read from her hiding in the hole when she was 8 to literally the moment she's rescued by rebels in Rebel Rising, and I've seen the moment she was rescued by the rebels to her death in Rogue One. At this point, the only thing they haven't told us about Jin is a fucking bra size. While I enjoyed both Catalyst and Rebel Rising, I'm sick to death of Jin and the Ursos, and Saw Gerrera for that matter. Their story is a stone Disney have bled completely dry, and I really don't want any more from them. It's not like there's any room left to tell more stories anyway, but I wouldn't put it past Disney to try. I wouldn't mind the occasional reference in other books, but not a full story. I actually watched Rogue One after reading this, and while nothing can save the ridiculousness of Rogue One, Rebel Rising does a great job of enriching certain bits of the movie. Beth Revis did a great job writing it, especially considering she drew on lore from other books and didn't retcon a single thing, and she did a great job showing the abuse Jin suffered in her short but utterly miserable life. I hope Revis does something else in the new canon, and I'd like to see her write a full adult novel. I'd like to see what else she could do with the lore and references to the rest of the universe in a heavier tale. So overall, I'd say Rebel Rising is definitely worth a read even if you're not a fan of Rogue One. In fact, I would even say it's worth it especially if you're not a fan of Rogue One, because it does help it to make a bit more sense.